My unfaithful children demanded my inheritance early, so I changed my will to leave everything to the charity they despise. The soft, familiar glow of the tablet screen painted a serene luminescence across Genevieve Sterling's elegant, if slightly etched with the lines of 78 years, face. She sat in the plush embrace of her favorite armchair, a treasured volume of Rilke's poetry resting, unread, on her lap. Her gaze, usually reflective and distant, was fixed on the digital script of the text message that had just arrived. It wasn't merely another casual communiqué from her son, it was the final, exquisitely polished jewel in a long, glittering chain of slights, dismissals, and calculated neglect. The words, delivered with a casual disregard that was both chilling and utterly predictable, read, "Mom, just confirming, the private jet to the Maldives departs next Friday. Callista and I have finalized everything. So excited for this family holiday. Oh, and regarding that little matter we discussed, we really need to move on the early inheritance for the venture. Time is of the essence." A peculiar, cold sting resonated deep within Genevieve. Her life, spanning nearly 8 decades, had encompassed so much, from the stratospheric heights of inherited wealth and social privilege to the quiet, profound depths of widowhood and the solitary navigation of a vast, echoing mansion. Yet, nothing, not even the grief of losing her beloved Arthur, had quite prepared her for the specific, unique torment of this particular interaction. It was not the casual omission of her presence on the trip itself, though that absence, hidden beneath the thin, transparent veneer of finalized everything, was certainly a familiar ache. No, the true masterpiece of their insolence lay in the audacious juxtaposition, a simultaneous, pressing demand for a substantial portion of her fortune, now, delivered concurrently with her explicit, albeit subtly veiled, exclusion from a meticulously planned family holiday, a holiday that, with a bitter irony, she herself had largely subsidized. The phrase, family holiday, now tasted like ash, dry and acrid, on her tongue. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the very marrow of her bones, that her name would be conspicuously absent from the passenger manifest, just as it had been from countless dinner parties, exclusive social gatherings, and even significant family milestones over the past decade. A tremor, cold and profound, something akin to a silent, internal earthquake, began to ripple through Genevieve. It was not anger that coursed through her veins, not yet. Instead, it was a profound, almost spiritual calm that settled over her, a crystalline clarity born from absolute, irreversible disillusionment. For years, she had meticulously observed the subtle signs, rationalizing them away as the natural self-absorption of privileged youth, or perhaps dismissing them as the product of her own overly sensitive, perhaps even demanding, nature. She had made excuses, built elaborate mental constructs to protect the fragile illusion of a loving family. But this digital decree, was different. This was a blatant declaration, laid bare in stark, unforgiving print. She was nothing more than a resource, a means to an end, certainly not a cherished matriarch. An automated teller machine, perhaps, but never a mother in the true, emotional sense. Her heart, which had endured so much, which had cradled so many hopes, felt less broken than utterly, irrevocably empty, a vast, echoing chamber where warmth once resided. She lowered the tablet slowly, her movements deliberate, precise, imbued with a newfound gravitas. Her gaze, unblinking, drifted to the framed photograph perched elegantly on the ornate mantelpiece, a younger Orion and Callista, beaming with an almost blinding luminescence, surrounded by their two beautiful, if increasingly spoiled and demanding, children, Lily and Jasper. A ghost of a smile, tinged with an unbearable sadness, touched Genevieve's lips. She remembered the sheer, unadulterated joy she had felt in providing for them, in meticulously ensuring their lives were free from the financial burdens and struggles she and her late husband, Arthur, had worked tirelessly to overcome during their own ascent. But that pure, selfless joy had, over time, calcified into a quiet, persistent ache, then a dull, rhythmic throb that pulsed beneath the surface of her daily existence, and now, finally, a searing, absolute emptiness that consumed her from within. The silence of her grand, cavernous living room felt more profound, more suffocating, than usual. Outside, beyond the thick, soundproofed windows, the city hummed its distant, indifferent murmur, a symphony of lives utterly unconnected to the private drama unfolding within these gilded walls. Genevieve closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, picturing the idyllic private island, the turquoise waters lapping gently against pristine white sands, the carefree laughter of her grandchildren she would not hear, the easy camaraderie of a family she was denied. A single, crystalline tear, perfectly formed, tracked a solitary path down her cheek, but it was not a tear of sorrow, nor of self-pity. It was a tear of profound release, of an old, tenacious illusion finally shattering into a million irreparable pieces, each shard reflecting a moment of past disappointment. This was it. The line, the invisible boundary she had so painstakingly upheld for decades, had not merely been crossed, it had been utterly obliterated, erased from existence. A steely resolve, cold and unyielding, began to coalesce in the vast, empty space where her illusions had once stubbornly resided. Her children had demanded their inheritance early. Very well. They would indeed get what they deserved, but it would be nothing, not in the slightest, like what they expected. The game, Genevieve decided, with a clarity that shocked even herself, had just irrevocably changed. And she, for the first time in a very long time, was ready, truly ready, to play by her own rules. Genevieve Sterling's life, for the better part of 2 decades, had been a living testament to boundless generosity, born from an inherited fortune that few could truly comprehend, let alone exhaust. When her beloved husband, Arthur, had passed away 20 years prior, he had left her not only his immense personal wealth, accumulated through shrewd investments and diligent stewardship, but also the vast, sprawling empire of Sterling Industries, a conglomerate built on groundbreaking technology and visionary leadership. Genevieve, already possessing a significant personal inheritance that predated her marriage, found herself the sole custodian of a financial empire that could easily sustain generations in unparalleled luxury. Yet, her deepest desire, the quiet yearning of her soul, was not for more material possessions or greater personal comfort, but for the unwavering happiness, the secure future, and the genuine affection of her only son, Orion, and his burgeoning family. Orion, even in his formative years, had displayed a certain innate detachment, a casual, almost unconscious indifference to the efforts and sacrifices of others, particularly those of his mother. Genevieve had always, perhaps naively, interpreted this as the natural self-absorption of a privileged young man, shielded by layers of comfort and ease. She had clung to the belief that with maturity, with the inevitable responsibilities of building a family of his own, he would eventually grow into the compassionate, engaged, and empathetic son she so desperately longed for. When he married Callista, a woman whose striking beauty was only outshone by her formidable social ambition and keen eye for opportunity, Genevieve had embraced her with open arms, hoping to finally forge a larger, more vibrant, truly unified family unit that would fill the quiet corners of her life. The initial years of their marriage were marked by what appeared, on the surface, to be genuine affection and effusive gratitude. But subtly, insidiously, a pervasive and deeply troubling pattern began to emerge. Orion and Callista, while professing their love and endless appreciation, developed an unspoken, yet utterly pervasive, expectation that Genevieve's immense wealth was not merely a safety net for unforeseen circumstances, but rather a foundational, inexhaustible pillar for their increasingly lavish and utterly unsustainable lifestyle. Their first home, a sprawling, exquisitely appointed estate nestled within a highly desirable, exclusive neighborhood, was purchased entirely by Genevieve as a wedding gift, a grand gesture that cost several $1 million. Orion, a fledgling entrepreneur with a series of grand, yet ultimately ill-conceived and spectacularly unsuccessful, business ideas, never truly had to worry about the prosaic burden of mortgage payments. Genevieve quietly, diligently covered them, month after month, year after year, without ever being asked, simply observing the statements and arranging the transfers. Callista's extensive, ever-evolving wardrobe, her frequent, indulgent visits to high-end spas, and their children's burgeoning collections of designer toys and extravagant gadgets were all subtly, or more often, not so subtly, funded by Genevieve's seemingly bottomless purse. The grandchildren, Lily and Jasper, were enrolled in the most exclusive, exorbitantly priced private schools, their tuition fees, astronomical by any reasonable standard, paid directly and punctually from Genevieve's accounts. She remembered the swell of pride she felt, attending their meticulously staged school plays, their fiercely competitive sports days, seeing them thrive, or appear to thrive, in environments she had painstakingly chosen and generously funded. Yet, even then, the calls from Orion and Callista were almost exclusively transactional in nature. "Mom, Lily needs new writing lessons, the elite ones are quite expensive, you know." "Grandma, Jasper's private tutor for calculus just doubled his rates, can you believe it?" Genevieve would always, unfailingly, comply, her heart yearning, aching, for a simple, unprompted call about their day, a shared laugh over a silly anecdote, a genuine conversation that didn't revolve around a direct deposit or an immediate financial need. The family's fleet of luxury vehicles, a gleaming, high-performance sports car for Orion, a spacious, cutting-edge SUV for Callista, even a vintage convertible for leisurely weekend drives, were all purchased by Genevieve, often presented as grand birthday or anniversary gifts. She recalled vividly the day Orion had casually mentioned his passing desire for a specific limited edition model, an impulse that led to her discreetly arranging the purchase the very next day, a quiet surprise. His reaction had been a perfunctory, almost dismissive thank you, a brief, fleeting hug, and then a quick departure to show off his new toy to his equally privileged friends. Callista, on another memorable occasion, had subtly, almost imperceptibly, hinted at needing a new diamond necklace for a prominent charity gala she was attending. Genevieve, ever hopeful, ever yearning to foster a deeper, more meaningful connection, had surprised her with a bespoke piece from a renowned jeweler. Callista's response had been to appraise the exquisite necklace with a critical, almost disdainful eye, murmuring, "It's lovely, Mom, but perhaps a bit understated for the event, don't you think?" Genevieve's heart had sunk, a familiar, crushing ache settling deep in her chest, a silent testament to the futility of her efforts. Their social calendar was a dizzying whirlwind of exclusive events, private club memberships, and exotic, meticulously planned vacations, all meticulously bankrolled by Genevieve. The annual family holiday, a cherished tradition Genevieve had initiated with such joy and carefully nurtured over the years, gradually morphed into a logistical exercise in which she was merely the indispensable financier. The destinations grew progressively more opulent, the pristine Swiss Alps for exclusive skiing, the sun-drenched French Riviera for leisurely summers, and then, inevitably, the secluded private islands of the Maldives. Genevieve always paid for the private jets, the five-star accommodations, the extravagant excursions, the Michelin-starred dining experiences. She yearned, desperately, for shared moments, for the warmth of genuine family connection, for laughter that included her. Instead, she found herself often relegated to a quiet, peripheral corner, observing her family from a distance, watching them interact with each other, oblivious to her presence, or worse, openly belittling her opinions and insights. "Oh, Mom, what would you possibly know about the latest trends in sustainable energy?" Orion had scoffed dismissively during a dinner conversation, waving away her thoughtful commentary on a recent news report, his tone a clear dismissal. Callista, on another occasion, had openly, disdainfully rolled her eyes when Genevieve suggested a quieter, more culturally enriching activity during a trip to Rome, opting instead for an exhaustive shopping spree at designer boutiques. Genevieve's earnest attempts to share stories from her own adventurous youth, or to offer wisdom gleaned from a lifetime of hard-won experience, were consistently met with polite, yet utterly hollow, nods, glazed, unseeing eyes, or outright interruptions that steered the conversation back to their own needs and desires. They were conversations, she realized with a growing, bitter clarity, that were meticulously designed to demonstrate their imagined superiority, their cutting-edge modernity, their utter and complete lack of need for her input beyond her substantial financial contributions. The greatest sting came not from the constant, relentless financial drain, though that was considerable, but from the vast, echoing emotional vacuum that had become her constant companion. Genevieve was invited to their grand, glittering parties only as an afterthought, often placed at a remote table with distant relatives or family friends she barely knew, a mere prop in their curated tableau of success. Her phone, which she kept perpetually charged, perpetually within reach, in the fading hope of a spontaneous, affectionate call, remained silent for weeks on end, only springing to life when a tuition payment was due, a new car was desired, or a trust fund needed a substantial top-up for one of the grandchildren. She had established substantial, meticulously planned trust funds for Lily and Jasper, hoping to instill in them a sense of financial security for their futures, but even these, to her dismay, became another convenient means of access to her seemingly endless wealth, with Orion and Callista frequently petitioning for early withdrawals for investment opportunities or educational enhancements, that inevitably translated into yet more personal luxuries for themselves. Genevieve had endured it all, clinging, with a desperate tenacity, to the fading, fragile hope that one day, they would truly see her, truly acknowledge her, not just as a means to an end, a source of endless bounty. She had convinced herself, in a silent, internal bargain, that her enduring generosity, her unconditional financial support, would eventually foster a sense of genuine affection, a belated realization of her boundless, selfless love. But the bargain had been broken, unilaterally and repeatedly, by those she sought to cherish above all else. The recent, audacious demand for an early inheritance, coupled with the blatant, unfeeling exclusion from the Maldives trip, was not just the final, crushing insult, it was the definitive, irrefutable proof that her lifelong bargain had been a fool's errand, a tragic miscalculation. The well of her patience, once seemingly infinite, had finally, irrevocably run dry, leaving behind only the hard, unyielding bedrock of her own long-suppressed self-respect. The morning after receiving Orion's audacious, dismissive text, Genevieve Sterling awoke with a profound, almost spiritual sense of clarity. The quiet, steely resolve that had settled upon her the previous evening had only deepened, solidified, with the dawn. There was no hesitation now, no lingering doubt, only an unshakable determination to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her fortune from the grasping hands that had so relentlessly exploited them. She dressed with meticulous care, selecting a tailored silk suit of deep sapphire blue, its lines sharp and precise, not for any social engagement or public appearance, but for the quiet, monumental task that lay before her. This was her personal declaration of independence, a silent revolution, and she would meet it with the grace, precision, and unwavering resolve befitting a woman who had, for far too long, allowed herself to be diminished. Her first call, made from the antique silver telephone in her study, was to Mr. Alastair Finch, her longtime bank manager at Sterling Bank and Trust. Finch had overseen her complex accounts for decades, a discreet and loyal confidant who understood, perhaps better than anyone, the vast scope of her financial influence and the intricate web of her family's expenditures. Genevieve, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion, explained her intentions with an unwavering tone that left no room for question. "Alastair," she began, her voice resonating with a quiet authority, "I need you to halt all recurring payments originating from my accounts, effective immediately. This includes, but is not limited to, the mortgage payments on Orion and Callista's primary residence, their various vacation properties in Aspen and Tuscany, the lease payments on all family vehicles, and all direct debits for their numerous club memberships, the exclusive country club, the elite yacht club, the highbrow art society, every single one of them." Alastair, a man accustomed to the occasional eccentricities and grand gestures of the ultra-wealthy, listened with a growing sense of profound unease. He knew, intimately, the immense extent of Genevieve's financial generosity to her family. "Genevieve, if I may humbly inquire," he ventured carefully, his voice laced with a respectful caution, "are you quite certain? This would, well, it would have significant, indeed, profound repercussions for Orion and Callista, and perhaps even the grandchildren." "I am perfectly, unequivocally certain, Alastair," Genevieve replied, her voice gaining a sharp, undeniable edge of finality that brooked no argument. "These are my precise instructions. Furthermore, I want to revoke any and all power of attorney previously granted to Orion or Callista over any of my financial assets, accounts, or trusts, effective this very moment. Their access to the children's trust funds, even for the pre-approved educational purposes, is also to be suspended. Any withdrawals from those funds must now be directly approved by me, and me alone, after thorough and personal review. She added, almost as a quiet, decisive afterthought, and I would like to schedule an immediate meeting with my attorney, Mr. Davies, to discuss a complete and fundamental revision of my will. Alastair, sensing the unshakable, unyielding resolve in her voice, knew better than to argue, to push back against such a formidable will. Understood, Genevieve. I will process these monumental changes immediately. Mr. Davies' office will be contacted right away. Is there anything else you require at this moment? Just one more thing, Alastair, Genevieve stated, a faint, almost imperceptible smile, tinged with a quiet satisfaction, touching her lips. I'd like to open a new, private account, completely separate from my existing portfolios, to be used solely for my personal expenses. Transfer a substantial sum into it, enough to be comfortable, to travel, to pursue my interests, but not excessive. And ensure it is utterly untraceable by anyone else, absolutely discreet. The seasoned bank manager assured her it would be done with the utmost discretion and efficiency. As Genevieve gently placed the receiver back in its cradle, a profound sense of relief, like a deep, cleansing breath held for decades, slowly expanded in her chest, filling her with a quiet, powerful energy. The first domino had fallen, and its reverberations were already beginning. Her next call was to Mr. Davies, her attorney, who, having already received a prompt, slightly bewildered call from Alastair, was prepared for her request. Genevieve reiterated her desire for a complete and comprehensive overhaul of her will, leaving no stone unturned. Mr. Davies, she explained, her voice steady and deliberate, I want Orion and Callista, and indeed their children, to be entirely and irrevocably removed as beneficiaries from my will. All references to their inheritance, any direct bequests, or any portion of my estate that would have gone to them, are to be eliminated completely, as if they never existed within its pages. Davies, a shrewd, seasoned lawyer who had drafted countless wills for the city's elite, paused, his pen hovering over his legal pad. Genevieve, this is a truly significant decision. Your existing will designates a very substantial portion of your estate to your son and his family, including the Sterling estate itself, your personal art collection, and a significant portion of Sterling Industries. Are you absolutely, unequivocally certain you wish to disinherit them completely, leaving them nothing? Absolutely certain, Mr. Davies, Genevieve affirmed, her voice unwavering, ringing with conviction. My wishes are clear and unambiguous. Instead, I want my entire estate, all my liquid assets, all my properties, and the full value of Sterling Industries, to be bequeathed in its entirety to the Global Environmental Preservation Fund. Davies' eyebrows, usually placid, shot up in genuine surprise. The Global Environmental Preservation Fund was a prominent, highly active environmental charity, widely known for its uncompromising stance on conservation and its often vocal, sometimes scathing, critiques of large corporations and their impact on the planet. Orion and Callista, with their penchant for lavish, wasteful consumption and their public disdain for anything that might impede their pursuit of luxury, had often publicly scorned the charity, dismissing its efforts as radical extremism and tree-hugging nonsense. The profound irony of this choice was certainly not lost on Genevieve, nor, she suspected, on Mr. Davies. The Global Environmental Preservation Fund, Davies repeated slowly, confirming his understanding, allowing the magnitude of the change to fully sink in. A substantial change indeed, Genevieve. A truly definitive statement. I will begin drafting the new will immediately and arrange for you to sign it at your earliest convenience. We should also consider including a robust no-contest clause to deter any future challenges, any attempts to undermine your final wishes. Excellent, Mr. Davies, Genevieve said, a quiet, deep satisfaction in her tone. The sooner, the better, without delay. As the days unfolded, the first subtle, then increasingly undeniable, tremors of change began to ripple through Orion and Callista's meticulously curated, excessively privileged world. Callista, browsing in her favorite high-end boutique, her arm laden with a new collection of designer handbags, approached the counter with her usual air of casual entitlement, presenting her primary credit card. The transaction was declined. Mystified, a flicker of irritation crossing her perfectly sculpted features, she tried another card, then another. All were declined, each rejection a small, sharp sting. She called the bank, only to be informed, with polite but firm detachment, that her cards had been suspended due to insufficient funds and unpaid balances. Her initial irritation quickly escalated into a simmering, disbelieving panic. Orion, meanwhile, received a terse, official-looking email from the management of their exclusive country club, informing him that his membership, along with Callista's, had been placed on hold due to overdue annual fees. He scoffed, dismissing it as a clerical error, a simple glitch in his mother's usually infallible direct payments. He called her, but Genevieve's phone went straight to voicemail, ringing endlessly without connection. She had intentionally silenced it, choosing to observe their mounting confusion and growing distress from a serene, deliberate distance, a quiet spectator to the unraveling of their carefully constructed reality. The financial dominoes continued their relentless, cascading fall. Notifications began to arrive regarding overdue utility bills for their sprawling, now seemingly enormous, estate, then a stern, legally worded letter from the mortgage lender, citing a missed payment and threatening further action. The lease payments on their luxury cars bounced, leading to increasingly aggressive, demanding calls from the dealerships. Orion's grand new business venture, which was relying on a significant, pivotal cash injection from Genevieve, stalled, then ground to a complete halt, its grand vision crumbling into dust. His frantic attempts to access the children's trust funds were met with a polite but firm denial from the bank, stating clearly that sole signatory approval is now required for Ms. Genevieve Sterling, and no such approval has been granted for these requested withdrawals. The initial irritation of Orion and Callista morphed into bewilderment, then a creeping, suffocating dread. This was utterly unprecedented. Their mother, their seemingly endless, inexhaustible resource, had never, not once in their entire lives, failed to provide, to bail them out, to fund their desires. Her deafening silence was utterly perplexing, her complete unavailability utterly terrifying. The Maldives trip, just days away, began to recede into the background, overshadowed by the terrifying, all-consuming reality of their suddenly, inexplicably crumbling financial edifice. They tried calling Genevieve again, and again, their messages growing increasingly frantic, desperate, laced with a rising panic, but Genevieve remained unyielding, a silent, unmovable force, a wall they could not breach. The stage was now meticulously set for the inevitable confrontation, a reckoning that had been decades, a lifetime, in the making. The knock on Genevieve Sterling's grand oak front door was not the polite, measured rap of a social caller, nor the gentle tap of a delivery person, but a frantic, insistent, almost violent series of thumps. It was the unmistakable sound of desperation, a jarring symphony of deeply ingrained entitlement suddenly confronted by an unexpected, terrifying void. Genevieve, seated calmly in her sun-dappled living room, a delicate porcelain cup of her morning Earl Grey tea cradled in her hands, had anticipated their arrival with a quiet certainty. The prolonged silence of her phone had told her all she needed to know. Their carefully constructed world, built on the shifting sands of her endless generosity, was beginning its inevitable unraveling, and they had finally been forced, by sheer necessity, to seek out the source of their sudden, profound discomfort. She rose gracefully, her posture erect, her movements fluid and serene. Her beloved housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had served the Sterling household for 30 years and knew the family's intricate dynamics intimately, glanced at Genevieve with a knowing look, a subtle hint of protective defiance in her eyes. "Shall I tell them you're indisposed, ma'am?" she offered, her voice low and solicitous, a loyal guardian at the gate. Genevieve offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a hint of something unyielding in her gaze. "No, Mrs. Gable. I believe it's finally time I received my son and his wife. As the grand oak doors swung inward, revealing the sunlit foyer, Orion and Callista burst in, their faces a chaotic canvas of raw panic, indignant fury, and thinly veiled contempt. Their impeccably tailored clothes, once symbols of their effortless wealth, seemed to hang a little less perfectly now, their expensive watches felt a little less significant in the face of their mounting terror. Mother! What in God's name is going on? Orion exclaimed, his voice high-pitched, laced with an unfamiliar tremor of fear and outrage. My credit cards are completely maxed out, Callista's club memberships have been suspended, and the bank just called about the mortgage. The mortgage, mother. Is this some kind of sick, twisted joke? Callista, her designer handbag clutched tightly to her chest like a shield, rushed forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and accusation. Genevieve, darling, please. What have you done? We can't get any money. Our personal accounts are frozen, and the children's trust funds, they said you blocked access. Lily and Jasper won't be able to go on their school trip next month. How could you be so utterly cruel? Genevieve raised a hand, a gesture that, while gentle in its execution, commanded immediate and absolute silence. Her gaze, cool and unwavering, swept over her son and daughter-in-law, observing them without judgment, but with an immense, almost weary disappointment. Cruel, she echoed softly, the word hanging in the air like a fragile, crystalline shard, reflecting the harsh light of truth. Is that truly how you perceive my actions? After all these years? After all I have done? Orion scoffed, his initial panic quickly giving way to a more familiar, deeply ingrained frustration and resentment. Years of what, mother? Years of you being our mother, of course. You're supposed to support us. You have an inexhaustible fortune, for heaven's sake. This is petty, vindictive, and frankly, completely unlike you. You're not yourself. Unlike me. Genevieve's voice remained calm, but it possessed an underlying strength, a quiet power that was new, formidable, entirely her own. Perhaps you are right, Orion. Perhaps it is indeed unlike the woman you have known. The woman who silently paid for your sprawling mansion, not just as a wedding gift, but year after year, meticulously covered every single mortgage payment. The woman who bought you every luxury car you ever desired, from that ridiculous, ostentatious sports car to Callista's absurdly oversized SUV. The woman who funded your countless failed business ventures, your lavish holidays to every corner of the globe, your exorbitant club memberships, your children's elite private education, their every whim and fleeting fancy. She paused, allowing each accusation, each statement of stark, undeniable fact, to land with the crushing weight of years of silent suffering, of hopes dashed and love unrequited. Did you ever stop to think, even for a fleeting moment, where all that money came from? Did you ever consider that it was mine? Did you ever, in your boundless, all-consuming self-absorption, truly acknowledge my existence beyond my bank account? Beyond my ability to provide? Callista, recovering from the initial shock, attempted a different, more practiced tactic. Her voice softened, laced with a practiced manipulation, a feigned tenderness. Genevieve, please, let's not be dramatic. We appreciate everything you've done, truly. But this is extreme. You're hurting your own family, your own innocent grandchildren. Think of the embarrassment, the utter ruin. Our entire social standing, our reputation, will be utterly destroyed. Social standing? Genevieve repeated, a faint, bitter laugh escaping her lips, devoid of humor. Your social standing was built entirely on my dime, Callista. It was bought with my inheritance, not earned through your own merit or hard work. And as for hurting my grandchildren, tell me, Callista, when was the last time you brought them to visit me, not to ask for money, but simply to spend time? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without prompting, or included me in a family gathering that I didn't have to subsidize, financially or emotionally? Orion, seeing Callista's manipulation failing, resorted to threats, his face contorted in a sneer of desperate rage. "You can't do this, mother. This is elder abuse. We'll take you to court. We'll declare you mentally unfit. You're clearly losing your mind if you think you can just cut us off like this. We'll prove you're senile." Genevieve met his gaze, unflinching, unwavering. "Do your worst, Orion. My legal team is already well prepared, anticipating every possible maneuver. And as for my mental state, rest assured, I have never been clearer, never more lucid. My decisions have been made with a profound clarity born of years of quiet observation, of enduring your casual cruelty, your blatant disrespect, your unending, insatiable greed." Then came the reveal, delivered with a quiet, undeniable power that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the grand room. "You demanded your inheritance early, did you not, Orion? You felt entitled to a substantial portion of my fortune now, to fund yet another of your grandiose, ill-fated schemes, even as you forgot to invite me on the family holiday I was largely paying for. You desired your share, and you will have it, in a manner of speaking, but not in the way you envision." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, yet it resonated with an undeniable force, a chilling finality. "My will, Orion, has been entirely revised. Every cent, every asset, every property, the entirety of Sterling Industries, it has all been bequeathed, in full, to the Global Environmental Preservation Fund." The words hung in the air, suspended in a devastating silence that followed their pronouncement. Orion and Callista stared at her, their faces contorted in a grotesque mixture of utter disbelief, profound horror, and incandescent, uncontrollable rage. The charity they openly scorned, the one they mocked as tree-hugging nonsense, was now the sole, undisputed beneficiary of the entire Sterling fortune. "No. You're lying." Orion finally bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson, veins throbbing in his neck. "You wouldn't. That's insane. That's our inheritance. Our children's future. You can't do this to us." "It was never yours, Orion," Genevieve stated, her voice calm and steady, devoid of emotion. "It was mine. And I have chosen to bestow it upon an entity that aligns with my values, an entity that works tirelessly for a cause I deeply believe in, unlike those who have only ever taken from me without a single thought for reciprocity or genuine affection." Callista, pale and trembling, her facade finally shattered, finally found her voice, a desperate, raw plea. "You'll be alone, Genevieve. Utterly alone. Who will care for you? Who will visit you? You'll regret this. We're your family. We're all you have." "My family," Genevieve replied, her gaze softening slightly, but remaining firm, unyielding, "would not treat me as an endless resource pool. My family would not exclude me, belittle me, or only seek me out when money is desperately needed. You have forfeited the right to call yourselves my family through your consistent actions, not through my decision." She took a deep, cleansing breath, the burden of years of silent anguish finally, irrevocably lifted from her shoulders. "My decision is final. You are no longer beneficiaries of my wealth. You will learn, for the first time in your lives, what it truly means to stand on your own 2 feet, to earn your own way." With that, Genevieve turned away from them, walking towards the large bay window, her back straight, her head held high, looking out at the world she was finally reclaiming. The confrontation was over. She had spoken her truth, reclaimed her power, and shattered the illusion that had bound her for far too long. Orion and Callista stood frozen for a moment, the enormity of her words crashing down upon them, then, with a choked cry of rage and despair, they stumbled out of the house, leaving Genevieve alone in the sudden, liberating, profound silence. Orion and Callista stumbled out of Genevieve's grand mansion, their minds reeling, the cold, hard reality of her pronouncement crashing down upon them with the relentless force of a tidal wave. The initial, disorienting shock slowly, inexorably gave way to a potent, toxic cocktail of incandescent fury, paralyzing fear, and a chilling, utter sense of disbelief. They had always believed their mother's wealth was an eternal, immutable fact of their lives, an endless, gushing spring from which they could draw at will, without consequence. Now, the spring had not only run dry, but its vital waters had been irrevocably diverted to a cause they actively disdained, a final, brutal insult that burned deeper than any financial loss. Their ride home in Orion's least luxury SUV, now feeling less like a symbol of status and more like a ticking time bomb, was fraught with a furious, disbelieving silence, punctuated only by Callista's choked sobs and Orion's muttered, venomous expletives. They pulled up to their sprawling, meticulously manicured estate, now a looming, mocking symbol of their impending ruin, its grand facade reflecting their crumbling dreams. The illusion of their privileged world, so carefully constructed on Genevieve's dime, was not just crumbling, it was disintegrating before their very eyes, like sand castles in a rising tide. The immediate consequences were swift, merciless, and brutal. The very next day, a stern, legally worded letter arrived from the mortgage lender, demanding immediate payment of the overdue sum, threatening foreclosure if the arrears were not cleared within 30 days. The lease company for Orion's gleaming sports car sent a final, ominous notice, informing him that the vehicle would be repossessed if payments were not brought current. Callista's personal assistant, a woman who had often facilitated her extravagant whims, called, her voice tinged with a subtle, uncomfortable schadenfreude, informing her that the elite private school had suspended Lily and Jasper due to unpaid tuition. Their exclusive private jet booking for the Maldives trip, a symbol of their untouchable status, was cancelled, the substantial deposit, having been paid by Genevieve, now irretrievable, lost forever. Their once eager social circle, who had so readily basked in the reflected glow of their wealth and connections, quickly began to distance themselves, like fair-weather friends scattering before a storm. Callista's desperate calls to her closest confidants went unanswered, her texts ignored. Invitations to exclusive galas, private club gatherings, and high society parties, once plentiful and guaranteed, ceased to arrive altogether. The whispers started, subtle at first, then growing louder, more insistent, whispers about financial trouble, about a sudden, inexplicable downturn in the Sterling family fortunes, about Genevieve's shocking actions. Friends who had once praised their impeccable taste and boundless generosity now viewed them with a mixture of pity and thinly veiled satisfaction. The idea of losing their social standing, of being perceived as anything less than affluent and effortlessly successful, was a fate far worse than mere financial ruin for Callista, a profound wound to her very identity. Orion, meanwhile, frantically tried to salvage his grand new business venture, which now lacked its crucial, promised seed funding. He approached various investors, but without Genevieve's implicit backing, without the formidable Sterling name attached to the project, his meticulously crafted pitches fell flat, met with polite but firm rejections. His previous string of failures, previously overlooked or simply absorbed due to his mother's deep pockets, now became glaring, undeniable red flags in the eyes of potential financiers. The business, which he had envisioned as his definitive path to independent wealth and personal glory, quickly collapsed, leaving him with mounting debts and a deeply bruised ego that chafed at the indignity of his new reality. Their frantic, increasingly desperate attempts to contact Genevieve continued, a relentless barrage of phone calls, pleading emails, and even an unannounced, belligerent visit to her mansion, where Mrs. Gable, ever loyal and composed, politely but firmly turned them away, citing Genevieve's unavailability. Their messages to her ranged wildly, from tearful, clearly insincere apologies and desperate pleas for forgiveness, transparently transactional in nature, to outright threats and legal ultimatums, filled with vitriol. "Mother, please. We're begging you. We'll change, we promise. Don't do this to us," quickly morphed into, "You'll regret this, old woman. We'll fight you every step of the way. You can't just abandon your family." Genevieve, however, remained unreachable, her phone perpetually on silent, her resolve unyielding, a silent, unmovable force. The Sterling estate, once a haven of effortless luxury and quiet indulgence, became a bitter battleground of recrimination and blame. Orion blamed Callista for her excessive, uncontrolled spending, her frivolous tastes. Callista blamed Orion for his failed business ventures, his inability to secure their financial future independently, his inherent weakness. Their children, Lily and Jasper, accustomed to a life of effortless luxury, their every desire catered to, began to feel the pinch. Their private lessons were cancelled, their designer clothes were no longer replaced with the latest trends, and the terrifying prospect of attending public school loomed large, a terrifying harbinger of their drastically altered reality. They were confused, angry, and directed their frustration at their parents, who had always promised them a life of boundless opportunity and privilege. While Orion and Callista descended into a maelstrom of panic, recrimination, and despair, Genevieve was, for the first time in decades, truly living. The day after the confrontation, she made her first call not to a bank or a lawyer, but to Clara, a dear friend from her university days, with whom she had lost touch amidst the relentless demands of family and her own quiet, internal suffering. "Clara, it's Genevieve," she said, a lightness in her voice, a quality that had been absent for years, perhaps decades. "Would you be free for lunch next week? I have quite a story to tell you." The lunch, filled with laughter and shared memories, was followed by an impromptu weekend trip to a charming coastal town she had always wanted to visit, but had never made time for, always prioritizing the whims of others. She walked along the beach, feeling the cool, soft sand between her toes, the invigorating sea breeze on her face, a profound sense of boundless freedom washing over her, cleansing her spirit. She visited local art galleries, bought a few pieces that spoke directly to her soul, not as investments, but as pure expressions of beauty and creativity. She began taking painting classes, a hobby she had abandoned after Arthur's passing, rediscovering the joy of self-expression. She started reading for pleasure again, not just the classics she revered, but contemporary novels, discovering new worlds and perspectives within their pages. There were still moments, brief, fleeting flashes, of the old ache, the phantom limb of a love unrequited, of a familial bond that had never truly existed. She still harbored a quiet sorrow for the family she had yearned for, the one that had never truly materialized beyond the transactional. But these moments were fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the profound, exhilarating sense of liberation that now defined her days. She was no longer a resource, she was, finally, truly, a person. Her life, once dictated by the insatiable needs and desires of others, was now entirely her own. She was discovering who Genevieve Sterling truly was, stripped of the heavy, suffocating mantle of matriarchal sacrifice. The silence of her grand mansion, once a source of quiet despair and loneliness, now felt like a peaceful, hallowed sanctuary, a space where she could finally breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in a very long time. Months turned into a year, and the seasons cycled through, each bringing with it a profound, visible transformation for Genevieve Sterling. Her grand mansion, once filled with the echoing silence of her unfulfilled hopes, now hummed with a different kind of energy, a vibrant, purposeful hum. It was the energy of a woman reborn, vibrant and deeply engaged with the world on her own terms, free from the shackles of expectation. Genevieve had cultivated new, meaningful friendships, rekindled cherished old ones, and embraced a myriad of passions and pursuits she had long set aside, neglected in her relentless pursuit of her family's happiness. Her painting classes had blossomed into a genuine talent, her canvases now adorning the walls of her home, vibrant splashes of color reflecting her newfound joy and creative spirit. She hosted intimate literary gatherings, discussing profound ideas and beautiful prose with intelligent, like-minded individuals who truly valued her opinions, sought her insights, and appreciated her for who she was, not what she possessed. She traveled, not on luxurious private jets dictated by her family's whims and convenience, but on comfortable commercial flights, exploring ancient ruins in Greece, savoring authentic cuisine in Italy, and immersing herself in the bustling, vibrant markets of Morocco. She found immense, soul-satisfying satisfaction in spending her money on experiences, on learning, on genuine connection, rather than on the insatiable, bottomless demands of her ungrateful family. She even became a quiet, anonymous benefactor to a local animal shelter, finding a purity of gratitude and unconditional affection in the wagging tails and purring cats that had been utterly absent in her human relationships. Her health, too, seemed to flourish with this newfound freedom. The constant stress, the emotional toll of her previous life, the quiet suffering, had weighed heavily on her, manifesting in subtle aches and chronic fatigue. But now, free from the crushing burden of expectation and the constant sting of disappointment, she moved with a lighter step, her eyes sparkling with an inner light, a newfound vitality. She was living proof that true wealth lay not in what one possessed, not in the endless accumulation of material goods, but in the profound freedom to live authentically, purposefully, and with unburdened joy. Meanwhile, Orion and Callista had been forced to confront the harsh, unyielding realities of a life without Genevieve's seemingly endless financial support. Their sprawling mansion, unable to be sustained without the regular, effortless mortgage payments, had been foreclosed upon and sold, a humiliating public spectacle. They had been forced to downsize drastically, moving into a modest suburban home, a stark, painful contrast to their former opulence and the grandeur they had once taken for granted. Orion, after his latest business venture collapsed entirely, had reluctantly taken a job in middle management, a crushing blow to his inflated ego and grand self-image. Callista, stripped of her designer clothes, her exclusive club memberships, and her effortless social calendar, struggled desperately to maintain any semblance of her former social standing. Her attempts to reconnect with old friends were met with polite but firm rejections. The social circles they once inhabited had closed ranks, unwilling to associate with their sudden downfall. Lily and Jasper, initially resentful and confused by their sudden, jarring shift in circumstances, had reluctantly adjusted to public school. While the transition was undeniably difficult, and they deeply missed the privileges they had once known, the experience gradually began to foster a sense of resilience, adaptability, and self-reliance that had been utterly absent in their previous gilded cage. They learned the true value of a dollar, the importance of hard work, and the necessity of earning their own way, lessons their parents had inadvertently taught them through their own painful downfall. Orion and Callista, now forced to rely on their own meager income, had to learn to manage a budget, to make difficult, painful choices, and to confront the direct, often humiliating consequences of their financial irresponsibility. The experience, while deeply humiliating and challenging, was also, in a strange, painful way, a catalyst for growth, forcing them to become more self-sufficient, if not yet truly humble or appreciative. Genevieve never heard directly from them again. Her new life was too full, too rich, too satisfying to dwell on the painful remnants of the past. She understood, with a quiet wisdom, that while her actions had been born of a painful, absolute necessity, they had inadvertently provided a harsh but essential lesson for her family, a lesson in self-reliance and the true cost of their own actions. This powerful story of Genevieve Sterling, a woman who reclaimed her life and her legacy, is just one of the many narratives of justice, resilience, and profound life lessons that we share on our channel. If you were moved by Genevieve's journey, and if you appreciate stories of individuals finding their strength against all odds, then you're in the right place. We regularly bring you compelling true stories that explore complex family dynamics, difficult choices, and ultimately, the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. Don't miss out on our next deep dive into the lives of people who stood up for themselves and found true freedom. To stay updated with all our new videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and click the notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. And now, we turn to you, our incredible audience. Have you ever faced a similar act of ingratitude or disrespect from those you love? How did you handle it? Or, if you were in Genevieve's shoes, what would you have done differently to reclaim your dignity and your life? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your wisdom in the comments section below. We love hearing from you and engaging in these important conversations. Your insights truly enrich our community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.